All right, so this week we're going to be taking on our utilitarians and discussing utilitarianism. Now, our utilitarians and utilitarianism, they come out of really they're doing their most important work in the late 18th, early 19th centuries. These guys give rise to social change. They give rise to changes in legislation. They give rise to or they further support what we might call first wave feminism. The utilitarians were really certainly ahead of their time, very forward thinking. So in terms of the utilitarian ethics, it's going to get its foundation from the moral sense theorists. Now, we talked about Hutcheson giving rise to David Hume. David Hume, of course, can be lumped in with those moral sense theorists. Again, keep in mind that the moral sense theorists were focused on the moral status of the individual. If you'll recall, Hume was very much about passions that originate within the character of an individual, so that this self, right, we'll say this, these passions direct action, right? And you determine right from wrong by watching an act occur. Recall, our moral sense theorists give us three individuals involved in an act. So we might say that you can determine what is moral based on what we might call sympathetic observation. Now, our utilitarians, as opposed to being concerned with the moral status of an individual, our utilitarians are interested in the non-moral consequences an action produces. Also, if you'll keep in mind that Kant believed that there's something inherently right or inherently moral in a law, right? Our utilitarians are focused on consequences, right? Our utilitarians give us a teleological ethics. Keep in mind, telos, goals, consequences, purposes. All right, so again, it's not character evaluation with our utilitarians. It's about non-moral consequences, right? So the big influence is going to be that pleasure is a measure of moral value. That's going to be the big influence of Hume on Bentham. All right, so this is Jeremy Bentham, and he sets the stage for, or he gives us the foundation of utilitarianism. So, it is Bentham's idea of utilitarianism is a kind of hedonism, this idea that we should seek pleasure, right, and try to avoid pain. Now, happiness is still our goal, right? So this is a short story here. Jeremy Bentham wanted to be mummified, preserved, and so this is his mummified corpse in University College London. So the first incarnation there, that's him. That's his actual head between his feet, and there's a close-up on his head there to the right. And they've put in a wax head in the place, and they used to keep the original head with the body, but it became such a common prank on campus to actually steal Jeremy Bentham's head. It was, you could think of initiations to fraternities and things of that sort. So now this is what you'll find in University College London, right? This is, again, there's Bentham with his famous cane, etc., but with a wax head. They no longer leave his actual head out for display. Okay, so the central tenet of utilitarianism. You act in such a way that your actions produce the greatest amount of pleasure, right? Now, this is Bentham. This is a hedonism, right? You're simply acting to produce pleasure. And Mill brings this idea of the greatest number. So that in the end, our two utilitarians give us this tenet of utilitarianism, that one should act in such a way that your actions produce the greatest amount of pleasure for the greatest number of people. Okay, so things to know. Pleasure is the only intrinsic good. And remember that an intrinsic good means that there is something inherent in the thing itself. Right? There's something valuable in the thing simply because it exists. Right? So all other values, right? All of the things that we value them as instrumental values. That is, because they are a means to an end. And for utilitarians, that end is pleasure. Right? Terms you should know. Utility. This is basically going to be a term we will use in place of benefit or advantage or pleasure. One unit of utility, that is one bit of pleasure, we might call the util or the hedon, H-E-D-O-N, the hedon. That's one pleasure bit. Next, the happiness principle, that makes sense. And then the hedonic calculus or the philosophic calculus. This is, Bentham comes up with a formula for determining the amount of pleasure an act would create, an act's utility, right? So, Jeremy Bentham sets the stage for John Stuart Mill, and Bentham gives us the hedonic calculus, which we will cover in class and also discuss the importance of John Stuart Mill. Jeremy Bentham not only sets the stage for this sort of thinking, but is really one of the first to be an advocate for animal rights. So our utilitarians are very different from Kantians. That for Kant, those things deserving of moral consideration were those things that can reason, right? That have the ability to reason. For our utilitarians, the way one determines whether or not someone or something is deserving of moral consideration is whether or not that thing or that person can experience pleasure and pain. Right? So you can see how this opens up the sphere, our human sphere of consideration, and how many more things we must bring into that fold now that it is not reason alone.